Before we talk about which different groups belong to which political ideology, liberal or conservative, we would be wise to define what liberal and conservative means. Liberals tend to endorse great government intervention into the economy. They believe the private sector, particularly the private for-profit sector, has to be very thoroughly regulated because capitalism cannot be trusted to produce good outcomes for everyone. So they want things such as the minimum wage, and they want to keep increasing it. They want very extensive safety regulations and other labor regulations. They want employers to provide health insurance to all employees, etc. Liberals also believe that in their private sphere, in their private conduct, individuals should be as free as possible as long as they do not harm others. So, for example, liberals support gay marriage. They support sex outside marriage. They support the right to an abortion. They support decriminalization of at least some drugs. In other words, it's your body. You should be able to do pretty much anything you want with it, unless and until you harm others. Then, of course, things change. But you should be left with as much personal freedom as the government can possibly leave you with. Now, at the same time, conservatives say we have to put emphasis on individual responsibility and not regulate the free market too much. That market is best which is the most free of government intervention. As Ronald Reagan said, the 9 scariest words in the English language are, "I'm from the federal government and I'm here to help." So you don't want the government to help too much, because by trying to help economically, it distorts incentives. It punishes productive businesses and people in order to try to benefit those who are less advantaged. But those who are less advantaged in the eyes of the conservatives are the ones that are less productive, less hardworking, that just feel entitled. So that's one side of conservatism. The other side is that conservatives like to rely on traditional values and limit human behavior in the private sphere. For example, conservatives traditionally resisted legalization of gay marriage. Conservatives resisted legalization of any drugs. In fact, they spearheaded the war on drugs, hoping to stamp out all illegal drug usage. So they tend to take a harsher view on individuals and try to hold individuals responsible as much as possible. Your life, your conduct, but with this freedom comes responsibility, and if you mess up, you pay the price. So these are the basic differences. Let's look at the alignment between groups, parties, and ideologies. Groups that tend to be liberal and vote Democratic than the population in general. Now, I have to say that before the 1970s and 1980s, there was a lot of overlap between different groups, but today there is not. Today, I would have to say that pretty much all Democrats are liberals, and all liberals are Democrats. There is a almost perfect coincidence between the two. It wasn't like this before the 1980s. Before then, you had some liberal Republicans and you had some conservative Democrats, but not anymore, not really. So African Americans, Jews, college professors, particularly in humanities and most social sciences, labor union members, Hispanics, and medical doctors who work for big cities, especially in county hospitals, tend to be liberal. If you look at African American votes, they tend to vote 90% Democratic. Barack Obama got 97% of the vote in 2008 and approximately 93% of the vote in 2012. Jews vote about 70 to 75% Democratic. College professors in the humanities and all social sciences except economics are almost entirely liberal. And in fact, the higher you go in the hierarchy of universities, the more liberal it becomes. So by the time you get to elite colleges, there are no conservatives at all. There are precious few of them even outside the elite colleges. Humanities and social sciences, probably 95-99% liberal. There is not an ideological diversity at all in these fields. Labor union members, yes, because labor unions tend to obviously bargain collectively for the benefit of workers, and that acts as a redistributing factor that takes wealth away from the owners and spreads it throughout the union membership, through the workers. So labor union members tend to be democratic. Hispanics or Latinos, overwhelmingly so. Just to give you an example, in 2012, Mitt Romney, the Republican candidate, got only 28% of the Hispanic vote, whereas Barack Obama, the liberal candidate and incumbent president, got 71% of the Hispanic vote. And medical doctors who do not make boatloads of money. General practitioners working in county hospitals, they don't make boatloads of money. They make good money, but not nearly as much as, let's say, specialists working in private practice. And also, these county hospital doctors see a lot of very poor patients without insurance or just with Medicaid. So they have, greater sympathy for the impoverished and for the disadvantaged, and I think this makes them vote more democratic and affiliate more liberal ideologically. Groups that tend to be much more conservative and vote more Republican than the population in general: white born-again Christians, 80-90%. Rural voters in all states tend to be more conservative because rural voters in all states, and frankly in pretty much all countries, are more isolated from the rest of the world than society as a whole is from the rest of the world. So they are in their own local community. They do not trust outsiders. They hold on to their traditional ways because that's their tradition, is how they survive. This is how they live. White Southern men, overwhelmingly Republican. The military, particularly the officers. If you talk about the enlisted men, there's much greater diversity because enlisted men often come from impoverished segments of the country, like the Deep South, or from minority populations like African Americans or Latinos. However, by the time you look at really the officer corps, people who have given 10, 20, 30 years of their lives to the military, overwhelmingly Republican. And in fact, militaries in all countries tend to be more conservatives than societies as a whole because simply because of the way militaries are. They're organized based on strict hierarchy and based on clear rules, which is the way of life and the way of thinking that is more congenial to tradition and therefore to more conservative values. And also because military in every country sees itself as the defender of the society, as an institution that preserves and conserves that society. So they're more conservative. Medical doctors and particularly specialists in rural areas and in the suburbs, they make a lot of money. They do not like a lot of governmental regulation. And some even resigned when Obamacare was approved in 2010. They began to resign because they didn't want to learn all the new regulations. So if they were close to retirement, many retired early. Wealthy business people and top-level management are disproportionately Republican. There are, of course, I understand there are exceptions, particularly among the Silicon Valley billionaires. They tend to have, the West Coast, San Francisco ethos. They tend to be, more liberal. But overall, if you look at the total numbers, certainly wealthy business people and top-level management tend to be heavily conservative Republicans.